Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Larry Pearson, Vice President of Marketing at Impetus Technologies, and I'll be your host and MC for today's session entitled Automated EDW Assessment and Actionable Recommendations for Moving Analytics to the Cloud. To get us started, and for those who may not know us, Impetus Technologies is a U.S. corporation. We're headquartered in the heart of Silicon Valley. And we distinguish ourselves from other providers in this space, at least in at least a couple of ways. The first is that we specialize, and we specialize in helping large enterprises achieve what is commonly referred to in the industry as a single source of truth. And that's what really gave rise to the mission statement that you see here on this screen. Otherwise called a single source of truth, our mission statement therefore reads, enabling a unified, clear, and present view of your business. Secondly, we have a deep combination after more than a decade of working with enterprises in this specific and specialized space. A deep combination of skills, methodologies, consulting services, all complemented with automation tooling to help you address wherever you may be in your particular journey. And you'll see some evidence of that during the webinar today. This mission statement is also perfectly aligned with the contemporary analyst view of our industry. In a recent Gartner forecast, they predicted that by 2022, 75% of all databases will be deployed or migrated to a cloud platform, with only 5% ever considered for repatriation back to on-premise. And further, Donald Feinberg, Research Vice President at Gartner, also made this statement, that we also believe this begins with systems for data management solutions for analytic use cases, such as data warehousing, data lakes, and other use cases where data is used for analytics, AI, and machine learning. So their view, our view, and the material we'll cover today is all aligned to all of that, is all aligned with that. And let's just take a minute now and take a look at the agenda that we're bringing to you. The first is our take on a current and future view of what is going on in this industry, direct result of our work with leading enterprises who are at various stages of the journey into modern data architecture. And today we want to draw from all of the experiences that we've had and share some common pitfalls that we're seeing in an attempt to help you avoid those pitfalls. Relative to that, to describe how the Impetus approach can then help. And as I say, that is a combination of methodology, expertise, and tooling. You'll see all of that in action today, with an emphasis on the whole area of automated workload assessment, which we feel is one of the most high value add things we can do to engage with you, to help you, particularly if you're at that early stage discovery or learning portion of your journey. Included that will be a demonstration of the automation framework. We'll summarize all of that then by describing some of the business outcomes that we're able to deliver together with our customers. And lastly, address the questions that you will be sending in. And again, you can do that at any time during our webinar. Encourage you to do that. That's one of the most interesting portions of our webinar, and is a great way for us to make this an interactive user experience for all of you. Another way we do that is by opening a poll. We've got a couple polls planned. The first poll you should see on your screen now, and the poll question is, what are the top 2 outcomes you would value most from doing a workload assessment? And here are the top 6 things that we normally get feedback from our clients saying this is where they derived the value from what we were able to help them do. First being define a migration roadmap, map the current EDW workload inventory to the target environment, analyze some of the complexities of that workload, helping to prioritize inside of that roadmap what to move first, how to validate that what we've done is accurate before we execute and go live with that over onto the cloud environment, identify technical debt along the way that may be the result of what's going on. In some cases, as much as 2 decades of enterprise data warehouse investment, and then some insights on some of the interdependencies that could be complexities of that journey. We try to simplify that for you. And lastly, a lot of our consulting up front is to validate the expected return on investment and then guard that expectation with the blueprint and the roadmap and all the analytics that you'll see starts here with the stage of automated assessment. Let me now take a brief moment, and that poll, by the way, on your screen there, that'll stay open for some period of time yet, and it's important that you do respond to that, and I'll share the results of that a bit later. Let me take a minute now, though, and introduce my colleagues on this call, on this webinar. And the first is Barry Tuthill. Barry is Vice President of North American Field Operations. He has close to 20 years of experience in the data technology space, and for the last 4 years has been leading our North American field teams in their work with our clients. He is a subject matter expert on the topic of developing a business case for enterprise data warehouse transformation, and an important part of that comes directly from the ability to do a comprehensive assessment, which he'll be presenting on today. With him also is Hadi Kodakala. Hadi is Director of Cloud and Data Strategy. Hadi also brings 20 years of experience in the data warehouse and analytics technology space, and he and his team work directly with our Fortune 500 clients to define and execute comprehensive blueprints and roadmaps to help guide them in their cloud migration and advanced analytics transformation journey. So both of my two colleagues have a deep experience, work directly with our clients, and let's give them an opportunity now to share some of their insights. Barry Tuthill.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to talk about really the first step in any sort of cloud modernization journey, which is assessment. So what I wanted to start off with and talk about is some of the common pitfalls that we see customers trying to address or talking about, when we're out there talking with them. First and foremost, it's, buying into the simplicity hype. So cloud providers do a very good job kind of positioning their services as very easy to start using. As far as bringing on net new use cases, and they also position those platforms as very easy to get existing workloads running from on-premise systems. And certainly we see the simplicity of deploying new use cases very, very true, but taking existing on-premise platforms and then moving them to the cloud really isn't so simple. In order to get the value of the cloud, you really want to leverage the appropriate tech stack options within the cloud and the corresponding execution patterns. So, the net of this is that using on-premise legacy patterns, really isn't going to help provide value when moving to the cloud or to get your enterprise benefits that you're expecting from the cloud. And we'll get more into this in more detail as we jump through the presentation. Next is related to lifting and shifting your existing stack to the cloud. As data professionals, where we've heard the saying garbage in, garbage out. And when you look at your on-premise data platform, there's data and there are workloads that just shouldn't be moved over. Either the data isn't being used, or the workloads are inefficient or not well architected. So you don't just want to take a big bang approach and just move everything over to your cloud platform. This migration is an opportunity to right-size your environment as well as optimize your environment for cloud. Third and finally is being able to build a cross-reference roadmap of the features and capabilities that you have in your on-premise world today to a continuously evolving cloud landscape. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they have large budgets, so they're constantly innovating and adding new services and capabilities in their cloud offerings. So when looking at migration and looking at your on-premise world, different workloads from your on-premise systems will run more efficiently in different cloud services. So, simple examples are things like, when you look at shell scripts in Netezza, or BTEX in your Teradata environment, or stored procedures in your Oracle environment. You need to make decisions around whether or not you should transition these types of processes to the native cloud EDW that you're moving to, or should they be moved to Spark-based frameworks and leveraging the associated Spark platform within that cloud service. Similarly, you need to look at ETL in general, right? Should you be leveraging Spark and migrating those ETL jobs to Spark, or do you want to leverage the native services that these cloud providers offer you, things like Azure Data Factory or AWS Glue? Finally, many enterprises have obviously heavy investments in on-prem ETL solutions like Ab Initio and Informatica. And there's a common mistake to try to cloud enable these types of legacy graphs and workflows. And we see a lot of customers running into challenges with that. So moving forward, how can Impetus, our approach help you? And, what is the Impetus approach? Well, our approach to cloud transformation starts with identifying, and addressing these core challenges and architectural choices that you have to help create a blueprint for a modern cloud data architecture. So our approach is an end-to-end automated cloud transformation lifecycle where we start with an assessment of the existing inventory of all of the on-premise EDW and ETL environments. And we're able to make specific recommendations around best practices, performance optimization, target platform execution, and other areas. Next, after the assessment, we're able to accelerate and automate the transformation process. So we're able to help take the existing code and business logic and automatically transform that into a cloud optimized framework for all of the various cloud providers. Third, we go through an automated validation step where we look at both the semantic and syntactic validation perspective. We do that validation of the transformed code as well as data. And finally, we automate the whole execution process. So taking those transformed workloads and automatically executing those on the target. Now that is our methodology and kind of the end-to-end tooling that we have to accelerate. For the purposes of today, we are purely focusing on this assessment stage, as that's the starting point and in many cases the most crucial step as part of a transformation journey. So the Impetus workload assessment, what it does is produces a number of prescriptive recommendations that deliver actionable insights. So it's an iterative approach where workloads can be assessed and analyzed interactively. We start by profiling and doing an in-depth analysis of the existing inventory of workloads, everything from code to scheduler scripts to ETL graphs to stored procedures and much more. We then automate the identification of the patterns within those codes. So we look at the query complexity. We look at queries that have the highest execution frequency, and we look at the dependencies across those queries. Next, we segregate those workloads based on those patterns and the complexities. So we segregate those in three kind of core buckets, if you will. First is migration as is. And what that means is identify the things that can be very easily run through the Impetus transformation engine to automatically produce an optimized corresponding output for that cloud service. So we identify what can truly be 100% automated conversion. The next step we look at is optimization. So these are workloads and queries that can also be automated and transformed and optimized, but there's going to be some level of human intervention involved, some sort of additional work that a developer and architect needs to do to further optimize and tune that workload for the cloud. And then the final category or bucket is re-architecting. So we identify those very complex or not well architected workloads within your legacy environment, and we look at those from the perspective of, does it make sense to try to automate this, or should we really just try to rebuild this from scratch on the target environment? And you know, in any given customer engagement, you know, the percentages across those different buckets or categories vary, but in general, we see, you know, roughly a 60-20-20 rule where, you know, 60% would fall into migrate as is, 20% would be optimized, the other 20% would be re-architecting. So the next step we take is going through and looking at recommendations for performance. So specifically, we're looking at optimizations that we can implement in the target code, in the target schema, and in the scheduling where we can achieve parallel execution on the target. Next, we're looking at specific recommendations that we can make for the target platform and what services you should leverage within the cloud environment. And finally, the output of our assessment includes a list of comprehensive reports and a prioritized and phased migration plan. So the first step is analysis. So what we're doing here is profiling and doing an in-depth analysis of the entire inventory of the ETL and EDW workloads. So we're looking at the scheduler scripts, we're looking at DML and DDL scripts, we're looking at ETL jobs or graphs, stored procedures, offline query logs, and things of that nature. We're identifying and analyzing the interdependencies between workloads, and we're able to plot an end-to-end lineage of the scheduler scripts, the ETL graphs, and do a script-to-script lineage of the interdependencies across these different scripts and graphs. The next thing we're doing as part of this is just producing a rich set of visualizations. So the data that we're providing the end user is interactive, so the user can easily understand and ultimately take those insights and drive action from them. The next stage is discovery. So we're automating the discovery of patterns within the legacy code. So we'll look at the code patterns such as statement types. We'll look at query constructs. We'll also analyze resource utilization for trends across different applications, across users, across different files within the on-prem world. And we'll also identify the complexity of the queries and queries having high execution frequency. Then we get into segregation, which I talked a little bit about already. And this is where we look at those complexity scores across these ETL jobs and the scripts and such. And we're able to bucket the workloads into these various categories. And this is where we can plan out the migration and help a customer really scope out and plan their migration effort. And finally, optimization. So this is where we're identifying technical debt within your existing environment. We can look at lineage across highly used tables and then help plan the migration accordingly. We're also looking at identifying unused tables or unused data for archival purposes. And based on the input workloads, our assessment recommends schema optimization and strategies that you can implement within the target environment around, in areas like partitioning, clustering, and bucketing for the benefit and of our clients, and ensuring that as you migrate these workloads over to your environment, that they're performing the way you would expect. And finally, we help create that future state architecture with our customers through this assessment process. So based on the workload types, mapping, we're establishing the compatibility with the various target platform options. We're making recommendations for effectively strategizing the future state architecture, creating that blueprint, and helping our customers choose what are the underlying stack options that are best suited for processing, storage, and the specifics of your workloads and landscape. So with that, I'm going to pass this off back to Larry. He's going to go over the poll results, and then we're going to jump into a live and interactive demo. Larry, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you again. Thank you again, Barry. You'll see the poll results appearing on your screen here momentarily. And just to recall, there were 6 different options for the question of what you would most be looking for from a workload assessment. And what we see here is the very first one listed, define migration roadmap. Almost 3/4 of our attendees said that would be the thing they would most be looking for. You see then the next most frequent are insights on interdependencies and analyzing the workload complexities. So there's a broad range of things people would be looking for. That's why when we go in, we really take the time to tailor what we're going to do and how we're going to do it from our portfolio of tools, services, and experience to exactly what you're looking for. So thank you for responding to that poll. And Barry, back to you for a demonstration now of the assessment tool.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Larry. So let me just walk you through a quick demo of the workload transformation solution, targeting very specifically on the assessment capabilities. As you can see, workload transformation is a web-based tool, so you just need a browser to access it. It can be deployed on the cloud or on-premise within our customer environment. And we start off by going through an assessment process, as we had mentioned. So I've created or pre-created an assessment for this demonstration. And what I'm doing is bringing together a number of inputs from a legacy on-premise environment. I'm bringing together scheduler scripts. I'm bringing together DML and DDL scripts, in this case from Teradata. I'm bringing together ETL jobs, in this case from Informatica, as well as offline query logs, and in this case, this is Teradata as well. So, as I log in and get into the assessment, I start off by getting a high-level view of what's going on in this customer environment. And in this case, this customer has already chosen AWS as their go-forward cloud platform. And based on the inputs of this analysis, our tool is recommending EMR for processing and Redshift for the consumption workloads. As you can see over here, Spark is being recommended from an execution engine perspective, and the reporting impact is low. And this is based on analyzing the workloads and the fact that there is a very small amount of BI or consumption type queries in the workloads that we analyzed. You also noticed over here that this maintenance section, which indicates essentially infrastructure cost is moderate, because what we're recommending is a good portion of these processes being moved to EMR, and that's a more moderate cost than moving everything to, say, a Redshift type platform. Okay, so let's start by looking at the scheduler scripts. Okay, if I scroll down here in this jobs section, this kind of gives us the highest level view of the migration use case. So if I click in here, we've analyzed 36 jobs. And if I look at this from a graphical view perspective, I can look at the dependencies across these jobs, right? And this will give us kind of from a high level perspective, understand the complex interdependencies across these various jobs and allow us to plan out that migration process right up front. And you'll notice as I jump into different layers of this demo, we'll get into more granular level detail beyond just the high level jobs dependency view. Okay, let me click out of here. Next, let's look at the queries. So if I go down a little bit further, you'll see this queries section. So we're starting out by looking at the total amount of queries being run in this legacy environment. And what we're identifying here is what represents unique queries, because unique queries is what we're actually going to want to migrate and transform. Otherwise, if you transform all, in this case, 15,000, right, you're actually spending time migrating and transforming redundant queries. So we want to, the key first step is to identify redundancy and reduce that redundancy as you do the migration. Next, we look at the query types here and the query constructs. And what we're doing is essentially bucketing them into their representative types. But more importantly, as I drill in here, we're applying a complexity score to each and every query. And this allows us, going back to what we talked about earlier around segregation, this allows us to segregate the different queries into what can be easily migrated and transformed in an automated way versus what might need some manual optimization versus kind of the more complex stuff that might need to be re-architected from the ground up. So we look at that both from a query perspective as well as, go back here, the query constructs as well. Okay. Similarly, we look at this from an ETL perspective. So I mentioned that we also had a number of Informatica ETL jobs that we were looking at. So if I go to this analysis tab and go down to ETL, I can also look at all the different ETL jobs that I have and also able to bucket them into where they fit from a complexity perspective. And we can get into more granular level detail of the different types of features and functions that are being leveraged within kind of the total Informatica footprint of our customers. So this is just kind of the high level of analysis. There's all sorts of greater detail behind the scenes. Similarly, we can start looking at what are the dependencies across all of these different files and jobs and scripts. So if you see this visualization here, and if I just expand it a little bit, you can see where we're starting to look at all the different dependencies that exist across this environment. Now, this is absolutely critical to plan out up front for any sort of migration exercise. Otherwise, if you start migrating things or moving things, certainly you're at the risk of things breaking or not working as they expect. So you got to understand the dependencies across your workloads up front. Okay, let me jump back out here. Next, let's go back to the highlights page. And let's look at resource utilization as I scroll down here a little bit further. Here we're looking at resource utilization, and we can look at resource utilization both from an application, user, and file perspective. If I dig into this, drill into this application view, I've got the names of all the different applications running in my legacy platform, as well as I'm breaking out the execution, CPU, and I/O time of each one of these applications. So this will help us identify, in the cloud environment, where are your most resource-consuming applications? It also helps us when we're dealing with in customer situations where they might have some sort of refresh happening with their legacy data warehouse, right? And there's an immediate need to reduce maybe 10, 15, or 20% of their on-prem data warehouse. Well, this allows us to kind of pinpoint things and find the low-hanging fruit in your environment where you can migrate them off, and then ultimately receive those that capacity value, or the decrease in capacity in that legacy environment. Okay. Similarly, we can drill down at a file level as well and look at all the different files. We can look at the execution, CPU, and I/O time, but also the complexity of each individual file. So now let's get into optimization, right? And what does the assessment do from an optimization perspective? So here's where we're looking at ways that we can achieve optimization both from three perspectives. One is from a code perspective, the other is from a schema perspective, and the third is from an execution perspective. So if I go into, for example, entities in the recommendation section, what I can see is that we have a list of used entities here, but we also have a list of unused entities. So when we think about migration and moving this legacy platform over to this new cloud world, what we want to do is avoid bringing stuff over that's not being used, that doesn't make sense in the cloud world. So we can very quickly identify those things for you through this assessment process. Next, what I want to show you is schema optimization strategy. So in the same view, right, if I look up, apologies, let me just add in the table name here. So I'm going to look up a specific table. And I'm going to show you some of the specific partitioning, bucketing, and clustering type strategies that we offer as part of the assessment. So I looked up this table, right? And it gives me a bunch of great information of what's the primary key, foreign key, and unique key. But from a migration and optimization perspective, it also gives me information of what I should do from a partitioning perspective, a clustering perspective, and a bucketing perspective. Also, what the target storage format should be. So we're providing, again, all of these insights into, or automated insights into what needs to happen from a target schema perspective. The next thing I want to just show you, and this will be the final part of the live demo, is I wanted to show you the file view, right? And one of the key strategies from an optimization perspective is having us look at, from an execution perspective, what types of processes can be run in parallel. So we're analyzing these files, and in this particular example, this Teradata _DML _sample, right? We've got a split of 42. So this tells us where the opportunities are for parallel execution in the target environment. and we can make specific recommendations and decisions based on this for an optimization of execution in your target environment. So I think, I know we're running close on time here, and we've got a number of other things to talk about. This is pretty much it as far as what we wanted to show you in a demo today, but we're obviously happy to spend more time with you directly and talk more about your specific use case or transformation journey. But in conclusion, let's quickly talk about what you just saw and what's kind of the ultimate goal here. First, what we did was we identified what can and should be migrated. And we also identified what could be automated from a migration and transformation perspective versus what might need to be re-architected. We also identified dependencies across jobs, across scripts and files, which will help plan for the whole migration process. We understood the workload characteristics to help determine what is the right choice what is the right platform choice or service choice within the cloud provider. We also identified optimizations that can be achieved, much of which happens automatically through the tooling itself, but also automatically identify where the outliers might exist, where some manual optimization might need to be done or re-architecting might need to be done. And ultimately, the output of this assessment is a comprehensive report and blueprint that we provide our customers so we can help you move this cloud transformation forward and help guarantee your success. So with that, that's all I'm sharing from a demo perspective. We're back to the slide portion, and I think that from a business outcome perspective, I think it's pretty obvious, right? We help our customers make more informed, data-driven decisions as part of their migration and cloud transformation program. We help de-risk the whole project by simplifying and automating as much of the process as possible. We help you reuse as much as you can within your existing legacy platform. I think a lot of enterprises think the only option is to re-architect everything from scratch. That's not the case. There's a lot of value that you can leverage from the 20 years of work that you've done within your on-premise systems. And finally, and importantly, obviously, is accelerating time to market. So reducing that time it's going to take you to move everything over to that new cloud architecture. With that, I'm going to pass over to Hari. Hari's going to talk specifically about a recent customer engagement and some of the business outcomes we were able to achieve with them. Hari, go ahead.
Thank you, Barry. I do have an excellent example to share with the audience. This is where we have applied all the things that you talked about, especially about the assessment module, to kind of deliver real impactful results. This is for a top 100 bank that started its data warehouse transformation journey to the public cloud, AWS in this instance. They had a 3-year roadmap as they started along that journey. However, since we got engaged with them early, and we are still engaged with them, we are helping them go through that. Post-assessment, we were able to quickly show actionable results where we were able to accelerate their transformation in multiple ways. One being, of course, the faster time to market. We reduced their roadmap for 3 years, from 3 years to a little over a year, without really compromising on any of their objectives from as we did the assessment. We actually provided them a good basis for a clear data-driven decision making. Once the assessment was done, we really pick all the points that are very critical and which would actually be very, very important for their transformation journey, while giving them a clear solution architecture that would maximize their existing investments, both in the cloud and on-premise. Also, we were able to kind of provide them savings from beyond just the faster time to market perspective. We have given them a roadmap, and we are able to give them a cost layout which is significantly lower due to our unique automation approach, in contrast to what it would have cost them otherwise to implement over a 3-year roadmap using traditional, I would say, risk-oriented manual approaches. So that is kind of the value we were able to deliver, and we are continuing to do so for other customers as well by using this assessment module. Back to you, Barry.
Actually, let me jump in. This is Larry, and we're going to transition now to the Q&A section. Thank you, Barry and Hari, for that very comprehensive view of our topic today. A couple of things here before we move to answering the questions that you have entered during the webinar, and there's still time to get those in if you would like. And the first is that we would like your feedback on your experience today. So you'll see a couple of questions and a feedback capability here on your screen right now. The first question is for follow-up purposes. Would you be interested in a deep dive of the solution as shown in the webinar today? And if you indicate that there, we'll be sure to get with you and actually tailor a version of this conversation to exactly your environment. And then if you would also rate your webinar experience, 5 being the highest, and very importantly, if you have comments or feedback, we can absolutely look at every single one of those and have made specific changes to our process and our delivery based on that, and we really covered your feedback there. So be sure to do that. Indicate if you want a deep dive, rate your feedback on your user experience, and then any comments that you may have. We'll transition now over to some of the questions. In addition, as you see here on your screen, you may want to jot that down in case you have other questions that are not covered here, or you want to reach us in some way. You can do that at our website or by sending an email, inquiry@impetus.com. Let's move, though, now to some of the questions that have come in. The first one says, for an automated assessment, what access does your tool need to have to the on-premise system, and can you elaborate on that? And which of our panelists would like to address that?
Hari, why don't you take that?
I'll take that, Barry.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, from an access perspective, we could definitely, we can access your on-premise system, and we do have a very flexible model on how we would analyze it. We could do it in an intrusive way or a non-intrusive way, depending on what is convenient for our customers. In a non-intrusive way, we would usually access just the logs, and which is completely outside of your system, so that it doesn't really affect your day-to-day running of your production databases. So that from a tool perspective, it's basically just logs. It's plain vanilla files, and then our tooling sits outside of it in a kind of a web application that can process all that information. Whereas in an intrusive fashion, which is usually not a typical way we've done these assessments, is physically connecting to the on-premise system and analyzing them. Though preview that is the least preferred method for most customers.
Excellent. Thank you, Hari. There's another question here that says, does your tool work with both an EDW and EDL environment, in other words, data warehouse and data warehouse? And when you do your assessment, how do you identify data which may be sensitive from a PII or personally identifiable information perspective? And who would like to address that?
I'll take that one as well, Larry. So for the first part of the question, yes, our tool does work. One of the key features of the tool is it's pretty versatile. It works based on grammars that we support for different technologies. It's not just one flavor of EDW. Teradata is just an example that Barry touched upon, but we support a host of technologies, both in the EDW world and likewise from an EDL perspective, which I believe is the enterprise data lake. We are cloud agnostic and likewise Hadoop distro agnostic. So we do support that. Now, coming to the part of identifying PII data, we do have utilities that can be applied, but from a tooling perspective, however, we do rely on the business know-how and metadata information that can be provided by the customer largely to identify these from a regulatory perspective and things of that nature. But we do have the ability to discover the PII data in a limited way for some of those data discovery aspects if needed.
Excellent. Thank you again, Hari. Another question that has come in, it says, apart from SQLs and shell scripts, I have other Teradata files. Can the Impetus tool assess those files as well?
Again, as I mentioned, because of the grammar that we have, it can be adapted to new file formats so if there are specific formats that are in use. However, we do support most of the traditional format files that enterprises use, and we can definitely support that and assess it through the tool. But it will always be looked in a case-by-case basis, depending on what are the unique files you may have in your environment. And we can take a look at that preemptively during the pre-sales exercises and provide you the actual approaches that we'll apply if they're really out of the wheelhouse today.
Excellent. We've got 3 more questions here. We'll answer one live and then close the webinar off. If you would, be sure to respond to the feedback poll. Any comments you may have, let us know if you want additional follow-up. And you can always reach us at inquiry@impetus.com. There's one here that says, we are still in the planning stages. Is there a way we could do an assessment without necessarily committing to go through the full 4-step process that you described? And Hari, you're kind of on a roll here. I'll let you keep going.
Certainly, Larry. That's a good question, and it's a typical question for a lot of the customers engaging in these exercises. Certainly, we can do the assessment. That is the first step. It's a very valuable step, as you have seen Barry showcase on all the different aspects that we look at. And we would also recommend you do that from a planning perspective. Engage us. In many cases, it's a very minimal investment, but it really delivers and takes away all the risk that you would otherwise be exposed to. So it's certainly, I would say, we can get that done. And if you reach back to our team, we'd be more than happy to help you there.
You know, I see another interesting one that just came in. It said, so your tool primarily uses application and database logs. What if the logs are not enabled to write details? And who would like to take that one up?
That will be me again, Larry. So if you don't have the logs enabled, usually what we have worked with is we also look at code. So it's not entirely true that we only assess the logs. We do look at your code base, and it goes even further to your orchestration logs, orchestration scripts. So we do a complete granular analysis of the entire corpus. Logs is a good way to separate what is active versus what is inactive to identify some of those aspects. But we can address it multiple ways. Either we could do a temporary logging enablement for a good representative sample of your system. So that gives us a very decent readout and understanding. And then when we collate that with your physical corpus of code, we can draw out a very clear picture and subsequently create the necessary roadmap and architecture and how that migration will take place and what are the various aspects that will be important for it.
Excellent, Hari. Actually, we have a few more minutes. I'm seeing a number of questions come in that are all related to the whole matter of assuring performance in the target cloud environment. And I'd summarize that by saying, how can I utilize, this one listed it this way, how can I utilize optimization-based recommendations during the migration? What are some of the things you see here? So we have a few more minutes. How do you want to answer that as well live?
Mm-hmm. So utilizing optimization-based recommendations, they are basically things that our assessment tool points out in a preemptive prescriptive fashion as it sees the different patterns in your incumbent code. And those recommendations are automatically applied when the automation engine is applying that transformation. But however, it is done two ways. One is it will be evaluated and selected to be the pattern to be applied on the target transformation, transform code and design, or it might require, in some cases, it will be done through the 60-20-20 rule that Barry was talking about, where depending on which bucket it falls from an optimization perspective, and it will be addressed accordingly. So it might require some re-architecture, but we would be preemptively capturing that during the assessment process. Likewise, there could be optimization tweaks that the tooling will recommend, and those usually get applied directly as we churn the code from through the automation exercise of our accelerator. And then it's again, and these things are validated and evaluated at multiple levels, both at a unit testing level as well as at an SIT level, and then following on with a full-blown benchmarking level from an apples-to-apples comparison based on the typical workload that we are transforming.
Excellent, Hari. Thank you. And thank you to our audience for those questions. I see some questions still trickling in, and we'll make sure anything that was not answered live will be addressed in a written fashion via an email. This does conclude our webinar for today. If you have not given us feedback on the feedback poll and your comments, as well as a suggestion on or a request on whether you would like us to follow up with you for a deep dive tailored to your environment. But that does conclude our webinar today. Thank you so much for your engagement, for your time, and have a great remainder of your day. Thank you.